Pop in, say hi. If you've never come into one of my lives before, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And here on Sunday night, I have a little crew going on. We have been together for years. I so appreciate them, because during the week, the lessons are a little bit heavy, aren't they? And for the most part, because they are super heavy, lots of people, right? It is content that is difficult sometimes to digest, even though I know in my heart it's so important for our movement forward that, this world is changing drastically. Me and my sister had this conversation today. We went to go see Superman, you guys. Hello, Owen. My number one. I got a few number ones here, and I'm so grateful. But like I said, on Sunday nights, it is, well, it's meant to be a little bit lighter. But the thing is, I have a little bit of company in that. That little bit of company that appreciates me, not so much for those, right, topics of heavy conversation that I do during the week, but because they like my company. And over the years, we've actually come to appreciate, come to get to know each other. And Owen and Andrew, if you're just popping in now, this is Owen and Andrew, and they have been with me ever since I started these lives. I gotta say, for almost 7 years I've been doing these lives, but these two have been with me since the very beginning. And if you don't know, I've been on YouTube for over 10 years now. And I'm not saying that in a kind of shameful way, because when you look at some content creators and they hit it. I take in that content myself, and we all get to decide for ourselves what we're going to resonate with in our lives. Sunday night, I am grateful that I have people who resonate with me. You guys, my throat is a little raunchy only because I ate so much popcorn today. Me and my sister Tracy. You guys, me and my sister Tracy this week have spent a little bit of time together. I even have some of that popcorn grease still on my chin. We've spent a little time together this week, and today we went to see Superman. First 20 minutes, I haven't been to a movie in over a year. I haven't even seen a movie in over a year, in all honesty. And for the first half an hour, I'm just kind of like this with the movie, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, have I loved that time that I spent in being entertained rather than taking on some of these serious topics and just showing up with them. That did I lose touch with the real world? No, I didn't. Right? Tastes in content change naturally. And I'm not saying that I didn't like Superman. It just took me a little time to get into it. It's like, right? It's like getting on a bike, Or a better analogy is me getting back to my evening and afternoon walks. It has been a bit of a journey in that for me. In all honesty, I thought maybe I lost that youthfulness and that ability to walk forever and actually to enjoy walking forever and feeling the zero impact when I finish that walk. And not only, I'm not going to say zero impact, because the impact is there when you connect to Mother Nature, right? Even if you're just sitting at your kitchen window having a cup of coffee, with the window open and the breeze coming through. It's important for us to connect with that. And they call it telluric energy. It's scientifically proven. You can go Google it for yourself. There's so much in the way of discoveries going on. And that's because, we are in this age of AI learning. And it's making the ability for the small man, if he chooses, right? Because when you choose things, it's that natural process of change. But if you feel passionate about something, if you feel pulled towards a topic, we're living in a day and age right now where the small man can have a voice, right? That the small man can make an impact. And I'm going to go further than that, you guys. I'm going to say that the small man is being brought up in rank. I've lived a great part of my life under that thumb. And I'm not saying that in a whimful or resentful way in any way, because it is in my choices. I could have chosen something else. And it's only in our surroundings and what comes across our past that give us that opportunity to be inspired or to be motivated or to be hit with a new idea that we can bring into our lives and move with it a little bit better. Hello, Owen. Hello, Andrew. And Andrew says, movie theaters are so loud. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you about that movie theater. It was like Dolby sound when I was a little kid. My dad went to take me to see Earthquake. Oh my goodness. I was in there for about 15 minutes. And I was a preteen at the very least. I think it was maybe 12 or 13 years old, and my dad wanted to go see Earthquake specifically because of Dolby sound, right? And the whole theater shook, and I remember bursting into tears and begging my dad to get me out of the theater. Thankfully, there was a candy store next door to the movie theater, and he got me that lollipop, and we went back in. And by that time, the actual earthquake part of the movie had stopped. So it was more tolerable, and it was tolerable. But the movie was exciting. I've always been a movie person. So I was really confused a little bit about going into the theater today and sitting there for probably 15 or 20 minutes going, okay, when is the excitement going to start? But I remembered that with any good story, there's always a baseline. There's a little bit of storytelling in that, in setting up the story. And that's exactly what was happening in Superman. But getting back to that Dolby sound, and that loud noise and stuff, that earthquake freaked me out. But when we went in to see Superman today, it felt like Dolby sound. Oh my goodness. I said, Tracy, I says that did not feel good for the system when things started calming down right in the beginning of the movie. Superman's having a big fight and stuff like this. And I says, oh my goodness, that didn't sit well with my system. But just like in that movie Earthquake, in setting up the scenario for the story, right? There's a little bit of excitement. There is a little bit of stirring that system up, and it stirred me up. Man, things have come a long way since Dolby Sound, and that's the truth. Let me get back and finish this comment that he was saying. Andrew says, I haven't been to a movie theater since, are you kidding me? 1997 when I saw Titanic. I also don't like the smell of a theater, all that popcorn. Oh my goodness. And saying with the popcorn, right? I have a little bit of a tummy ache because I ate popcorn on an empty stomach. And when I got home, oh my goodness, I was so zapped, and not being a napper, right? I sat at the desk for 20 minutes and I caught myself dozing again so early, and I wasn't tired. I slept so good last night because Saturdays is my day off from being online. So I went to bed early last night and I slept so amazing. I slept all night solid. I got up feeling good, excited to go to the movie. By the time I got home, I sat in the chair, I don't think for more than 15 minutes, took in my fluids, and then said, "Oh, you know what? Maybe it would be a good time to lay down for an hour or two." And I set my alarm for 7 o'clock. I didn't fall asleep. I don't think I dozed off in any way, but it was really nice to lay in my bed and relax for an hour. But 15 or 20 minutes into that movie, oh my goodness, it was so good. It was really good. It's way different because I haven't seen, I don't think, the last Superman, or maybe the Superman even before that, because this was really different. There was a different Superman. He was super tall, super handsome, not like the other Supermans weren't handsome, but different characters all together. And it took me a few minutes to recognize who the other characters, because Jimmy was there, and Louis Lane was there, and Crypto the dog. Oh, and the other character, the Supergirl, right? Is that Supergirl, the young adult teenage girl, right? She was in there too with her dog. And wow, what a great movie. And I saw Avatar, and Avatar was actually a computer made movie, really, really well done. If you haven't seen Avatar, I would for sure recommend Avatar, just for the storyline and for the beautiful graphics. But all those beautiful graphics were made by computer, and right, it was no different from Superman, right? Those movies, I don't think possibly that there were a lot of movie sets in that movie. I think a lot of it was studio made and digitally made, but it didn't make it any less better, right? It was, I enjoyed it so much. But more important than enjoying I just gotta turn this off. Um, just my notification so I can just see the comments there. Um, Not only was it enjoyable going to movie, it was enjoyable having the popcorn, number one, because that was my treat this week. I have had basically no sugar at all, and the only flour that I've had was Bisquick. And when I have those serious cravings that I need those carbs, then I would make myself a little biscuit to go along with my eggs in the morning, right? And it's been working out so good, and I'm down 14 pounds. I'm saying that with a little pride in myself, not because, I feel like I need to diet. I'm somebody that believes, as you get a little bit more mature in your life, it's important to have a few extra pounds on you, for those times when you're not feeling well, or for when you can't really take care of yourself nutritionally. We all get sick. We all, at some point are going to have issues, even if it's not until, right, we're old and decrepit, right? We are going to have issues, and it's a natural way of life. In all honesty, I am grateful for my good health, but it's not like I haven't had little issues myself, but they've never been anything that has held me up. Now, getting back to those walks that I've been doing is one of the reasons why I've lost those 14 pounds. I went on that diet not to lose weight. I went on that diet to help me out with my feet, thinking maybe it was my weight and not my good shoes. But really what it is just not being in the habit of going for my walks. And so, you know, I have been going for my walks every day, I think now for 2 weeks, right? Most of them are fairly long walks where, I'm planning to be gone for at least a few hours or a couple of hours. Some of them, right, that, maybe I am involved in a lesson or going out with my sister like I did today. I didn't go for a walk today, but you can better believe that I'm not going to end my day without a walk. So what I'll probably do is I'll take one of the shorter walks, which is maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles, right, tonight, and I'll just go and walk and grab a cup of coffee and get some fresh air. Okay, let's get to the fresh air, you guys. Um, but I'm just going to say what Owen says here. Owen says, "Oh yes, it can be so loud and a bit smelly too." I like the smell of popcorn in the theaters. For me, I have this, maybe it's a mental kink or something, but I feel that it's important for me. If I'm not interacting with people, I should at very least be mixing with people because, I think I'm in that stage now that, maybe my bubbly personality rubbing up to next to other people, even strangers, short conversations, right? That we actually get an opportunity to do some good, even if we don't understand. Each one of you, too, in our interactions, we don't understand how we can impact somebody's life, day, just even sometimes their moment. I walked down to the Forks today. We live in a crossing of two major rivers, the Red River that runs north from the States, and also the Assiniboine River, which I believe runs from the west. And they cross paths. They cross paths, and for thousands of years, that where they cross paths have been a meeting place. As of recently, when I say recently, in the past 150, 200 years, those two rivers crossing and intersecting have been for the voyageurs, the fur traders, right? The first settlers of Canada. And it's always been a meeting place, a place to do business. For the most part, it's a place to do business. They used to have stables there, and, they used to deliver milk by milk carts and stuff. Well, those buildings were still there. And I believe it was sometime in the 80s because I remember them working in that area. They transformed all those abandoned barns for the horses and the carriages, the milk carts, um, all those storage facilities, from where the voyageurs or the merchants would come by and they'd load up with the warehouses. They transformed all of those into gift shops and museums and antique stores, and they try to keep it in theme as a meeting place and in bringing in and introducing some of those same aspects of our history. Not only in our history, I don't know if you guys know, but one of our uh, very important, very famous museums, not just to Manitoba, but to all of Canada and to all of the world. And I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you've ever heard of the Museum of Human Rights. It's a museum that's all about human rights, not just what we got right, but what we got wrong. And in different, what do you call that? Enlightenings, when we get enlightened by circumstances or somebody else's experience, or, you know, somebody trying to do right and it's made to look like a wrong. They're right. We are a work in progress as a species, human beings in general. We've made lots of mistakes. We've made lots of mistakes with our indigenous population here in Canada, and in doing that, we try to do our best to. You're right. Sometimes you can't repair the past, right? You can't take the you can't give back a heritage to a group, to the indigenous, when we rip the rug right out from underneath them. But you can do right by that, right? And I'm not saying it was our generation or even the generation before, but we have done wrong. And even if we are not responsible for it personally, it needs to be vocalized. It needs to be put out there and presented so that we can actually understand, right, where we made our mistakes and have that opportunity again by choices to make right our wrongs. And we live in that age, and we've been living in that age ever since, right? AI learning, because we're this close right now, right? I don't want to be enemies with anybody that, right, that I didn't personally have those interactions with. But, I do interact, and I always have. I am somebody that believes it takes all kinds to make the world. And when I cross somebody who's poor or homeless, I have no problem in standing and chit chatting with them. And again, that little bit of sunshine, that we all have that opportunity, right? Because you guys do it for me, right? Just there online, you do it for me without even realizing how much you bring to my life, how much motivation and inspiration, because I understand that I have a little bit of company in what I'm doing, that it makes it so that I'm braver, I'm less likely to let myself down, because, now it's just not me, right? It's just not me anymore. But we all have to do our part, in believing that it takes all kinds to make the world. It's in that mutual. And it might not have been mutual at one time, because, growing up in the 60s and 70s, right? I personally, being a feral child, my parents didn't care who I hung out with. And I am very grateful to say that, one of my best friends. Oh my goodness, so many. Oh my god, I'm missing. I just forgot my friend Sally, and I come from Vancouver. And if you know anything about Vancouver, I would have to say it's like 50% Chinese, right? It's a very Asian culture. No matter where you go in the Vancouver, Victoria area, right? And my best friend in and I quite often say that I didn't have friends in school, grade school, but I did. You know, Sally in uh, in Vancouver, who was Chinese, and she was a really good friend. I got invited as a member of her own family, and because I come from a dynamic family myself, I didn't want my friends to see that. I didn't want my family to slip up, and right. I again, it's sometimes in that misrepresentation to say, hey, I'm just as good as anybody. And maybe it was a little bit of that guilt. Maybe it was a little bit of shame in my own upbringing, and it made it so I didn't want to have my friends at my house. I don't know if there's anybody else here who had that same issue, but I never wanted to bring my friends over to meet my family, meet my parents or anything, because, well, my mother was extremely volatile. She couldn't control herself. She didn't care, right? If she had something to say to me or say something to one of my friends, she would have, and it all depended on her mood and in her mood. And I'm not saying that also in a negative way, but also in that explanation for myself as to why maybe that I didn't have it perfect, but I was bumbling along trying to have a life for myself, and being feral, and my parents not caring, maybe not even knowing that my friend Sally was Chinese. I'm gonna stop, send some good cheer out to the fire. They got a new fire alarm. Is that what you call it? Fire horn? What do you call that? Right? The sounds from the fire engine are really, really different. It's taken me some time to get adjusted. The first few times it really scared me because they're so loud, and the pitch of them have gone up a couple of octaves. And so when they go off, I just kind of go, oh, right? It takes me a few seconds to adjust to it. And I send my good cheer off to the fire trucks or the ambulances. And yeah, now Now, I still find it loud, but it's in that adjustment. And again, it's in that idea. Sometimes it's how we rub with the world that, that we can send a little bit of good mojo, even though I don't know the fire guys, the fire and the paramedics. I don't know them personally. I see them sitting in their lawn chairs in front of their station waiting for a call, but I've never interacted with them. Um, but right, they're doing such a service, and they saved my sister a few times in the past year. She still hasn't got in for her operation. I tried to talk her out of the movie. Right, I'd love to spend time with my sister, but I did try to talk her out because she is very, very ill, right? And she's lost a lot of weight. That's one of the reasons why I'm a little anxious about being on a diet because, I wish this little bit of extra weight that I'm trying to peel off, right? That I could just go, there you go, Tracy. It's for you. Because it would serve her so well. But she's holding her own. She has kept her weight on, I think, for the past 6 months. She could do to gain another 20 pounds. But right, it's a lot better than that consistent loss that she was in the past half years, right? She's consistently, like my sister also was pretty close to hitting the 300 mark. And within a year, oh my goodness, she lost all that weight and she's very small right now. But you have to consider also when you lose that kind of weight, you have a lot of skin, and that's not actual fat, right? So you have to think that maybe she's got a good 20 pounds of loose skin on her. So you have to think that 120 she probably could do to gain another 20 or 30 pounds just to, right, ease her mind and ease her sister's mind, her families. We want my sister to stick around, and this operation is going to give her a couple of decades, has the opportunity, maybe even more. And so I ran over to her house yesterday when I found out she wasn't taking vitamins, and I went and bought her the same vitamins that I take, the gummy vitamins, because she has stomach issues. She's not digesting her food either, and with a gummy vitamin, you can kind of suck on it, and right, a lot of the nutrients will go on the tongue right into the system, and the rest of it is already digested by the time it hits the gut. So it just needs to be dispensed out to the system, and she's taking them. She's taking one in the morning and she's taking one at night. I'm super happy about that. And but I kept saying, if you're not feeling good, we won't go to a movie today. And we went to a movie, super enjoyed. We even had the fancy seats, you guys. Oh my goodness, premier seats. Your feet go up in the air. It's like sitting in a lazy boy. You can put your head, like you got the buttons on the side. You can put your head. You could sleep. You could go to sleep there. It's like a bed. These chairs go to bed. Go like a bed, and they have like two on the end of a few of the rolls. They're a little bit more expensive, but oh my goodness. Oh, and this movie Superman was in 3D. And not only was this movie in 3D, wow, you guys, they had such great messages on topics that, because I'm big on the word choices, and right, because we all get to make choices in our life. And, in this movie, I don't know if I'm going to give it away, right? Because in the first movie, he came in his little pod, and then all he had was his parents' message to him to say, save the world and be a good man. And right. But then the last of the message kind of phased out. Well, Superman, he put his own, what do you call that, spin on the story, and he put what he wanted his parents to say about what his mission would be coming to Earth. And at the end, it turned out that, they were looking for a planet to take over, right? His parents. Isn't that crazy? A crazy spin on the Superman story that his parents said, get there, get it ready, right? Make it habitable, right? Take over. And so the world kind of went against Superman a little bit and took the side of the actual bad guy in the movie. And that's when it really started good. So does that storyline hit? I go, oh, this is going to be good. And I started getting right into it. But when I understood, because in the end, Superman was kind of fighting himself, which was kind of like this AI learning in the digital age created, through his DNA, another replica of him. And he was fighting himself. And then at the end of the battle, he says, yeah, but you know what? It's not just the brawn of Superman, it's the brain, right? And each one of us gets to make the choice. Each one of us, can allow ourselves to be course corrected if we got it wrong, right? And, you have to work like a team, like a partner for yourself. And it just compounded some of what I believe now to be amazing ideas, amazing truths for myself. And I actually started clapping in a couple of spots. I was the only one clapping, right? He was explaining things. And I'm going, oh my goodness, they got mindset in the movies now. The second thought that came into my mind was, I'm not in it by myself. I'm thinking, right? Because the small man, right? The people who created the storylines, the people who created the the digital film, because this movie was completely, almost like I said, probably not too many movie sets, but a lot of it was digitally corrected and created. And so it's amazing to know that, a lot of these people who may have started with nothing except their passion, right? Except their passion to do a little bit better. And in their own ideas of a good message, right? They build those message within their output of movies. It was kind of like that idea. Was what came into my mind was, when we were kids, and I guess even to this day, Sesame Street, right? For me as a kid, it wasn't education that drew me to Sesame Street. It was Big Bird and the Cookie Monster and Grover. Was it Grover? The little thing that was in the garbage pail, the blue furry thing, right? It was those characters, but without me knowing. Oh my goodness, that probably, right? I always attribute my learning to read at a very young age. I think by 3 years old, I was reading. My dad used to bring comic books, and my auntie, who was only a few years older than me, she loved Archie and Veronica, and I'd have all those comic books, and they would have those little white bubbles, where they would talk, and I would always want to know what were they talking about? What did those bubbles say? I knew they were words, and I knew I couldn't read, but I would read into the comic page, into the square of the picture, and I would take a guess what that scene was, right? And they usually did that in comic books. And I didn't know it at the time, but I taught myself to read. Now, I don't know why I brought that up. Oh, Sesame Street. And, it probably wasn't just the comic books. It was probably, the love for Big Bird and for Grover. That was his name. Let me read. I know somebody would have said something like that. And I'm gonna have to come into the comments because, like I tell everybody, you guys yap more than me, and I so appreciate that you come in and contribute the way you do, because Sunday nights truly is for you guys. I try to keep it light. I understand, right? Change and choices, and I can't help it that, this is the way I am now, and I have to accept myself, and I have to allow myself to come to the surface because it doesn't serve anybody if I'm right, if I don't go for walks and interact with strangers. Like yesterday when I went for a walk, I walked down to this crossing of the two rivers because now it's a meeting place. It's a now a tourist attraction here in Winnipeg. And when I went down there, there were thousands of people. They have little sea buses where you can take rides up and down the river. They have docks, so you can come down the river in your own boats and you can dock your boat there and then just walk up to one of the restaurants, or you can sit out on the patios or in lawn chairs and decks and picnic tables. Oh my goodness, it was so. They have markets. I went into the market last night and I walked around the market and so many different shops and restaurants. It was absolutely amazing, but thousands, I say thousands of people down there last night. So I went downstairs they call it the terminal, right? So in the terminal, it was one of those buildings that had been renovated, and I guess that was terminal would have been where they might have stored the train cars, I think, you know. And so it was shops, and so there's a shop downstairs that I like to go in because I love antiques. I love the old stuff. You guys know I do. And so I thought, well, maybe we can go down there. Maybe I can find some scores, take a picture, send it my sister, and she likes it. Maybe I can buy it if she thinks that she can make a profit on it. But there really wasn't. They were pretty much charging tourist prices in there, unfortunately. So it's not really a place to find good scores. But when I was in there, you guys, I was behind the wall looking at items on the wall, and a gentleman walked by me with I guess somebody who worked there, and he wanted to get into a cabinet. He wanted something in one of the cabinets that were locked up. And this place was huge. Like I got lost when I was trying to find an exit to get out. It was super huge. And I actually had to ask somebody, a couple of people, how do you get out of here? And then I said, oh my goodness, if there was a fire going on in this building, we would all be dead. And they looked at me all strange. I says, I can't find the exit. And they laughed, right? And I figured it was somewheres around the cash area, and I was right. I had to ask somebody who worked there. But when I was standing behind that shelf, somebody had asked to look inside the cabinet and get an item out of the cabinet. And he was chit-chatting and stuff. And he goes, oh, yeah, I'm a bottle digger. Oh, my goodness. I was so fast. I whipped out from the other side of the shelving, and I go, bottle digger, right? I says, I've got a bottle spot, right across the river. He goes, where? I says, there's a building that's being made, it goes back 100 feet, but this big high rise is being built on top of it. But because I've been walking down to the forks for the past week, I've really been enjoying the walk at the forks. I take a different route, a different destination every time I go for one of my evening walks or my day walks, and we'll get back to the walks. But I said it's a tall high rise, and I said I walked by there, and I just noticed yesterday, and I've been walking right for probably a week down at the forks because I've been really enjoying interacting and watching the ducks and walking along the river, and you'd feel a little bit more comfortable in tree hugging because people aren't sitting out on their porches watching me hug their tree as I'm walking by. And I do that quite a bit. But also at the same time, in saying that, I see people around, then I get a little bit right. Then I'll just kind of walk by the trees and I'll just hold my hand out, or I'll grab the leaves over my head because they're hanging over the sidewalk. But yeah, I whipped out from behind that shelf, and I says, oh my goodness, I says, I'm a bottle digger too. I says, I've not met another bottle digger in the city. I says, if you want to go bottle digging with me, I have the most amazing spot. And I still have that spot. Now I don't have the whole 100 feet, but because they built the high rise about 20 feet or 30 feet away from their property line for flooding reasons and stuff, it makes sense that they're not touching the bank that I've been digging in, you guys. So I sent them a message. As I walked home, I took a picture of the spot. I says, I'm not territorial. This is the spot. If you want to go in and do some bottle digging yourself, you're more than welcome to. If you want to partner up with me, just give me a call, right? And I would be happy to come down. I would make some sandwiches, or, well, I don't do bread, right? But I would make us a lunch and we could hang out there all day. And if he wants to go on his own, because I'm a stranger, right? And lots of people don't want to just hang out with people they don't know. That go ahead, just make me a path, because it really has grown in, and I'm sure there's still ticks going on. And I don't plan on going for another 2 weeks. I'm going to give it till August 1st. Then I know the tick season is really for sure over. Once it really starts getting hot, and once the dragonflies come out, right, the bug situation, it calms down a little bit. It's a little bit more buggy out there than it was yesterday, right? I even going for my walk yesterday, I got more, I'm assuming they're mosquito bites, right? Um, but the they have been manageable. And I think probably for the past few years, the reason they were manageable was because it was really dry. Yeah, so this gentleman, he says, oh, no, right? For sure, let's go. This is my email address. He gave me his email address. He introduced himself to me. He's a tattoo artist, super, super cute too, but he's like half my age, but he was super cute. Just my type if I was 30 years old, for sure. And yeah, we're going to get together and we're going to do some bottle digging in my favorite spot. That spot where I got my hutch. Is Kathy here tonight? I better get into these comments for a few minutes before I get way too far behind. Let me know where I left off and where I want to go. That is in the continuation of I know what it is. The fires, guys. Just remind me if I lose track to talk about a little bit about the fires that are going on here in Manitoba. If you don't know, I'm from Manitoba, Canada. If you're just popping into my live for the first time, right? Pop in, say hi, join in on the conversation if you'd like to. If you want to hang out in the background, right? Go ahead, right? It'll take you a couple of visits, but eventually you'll pop in. You'll pop in. Okay, is Kathy here tonight? I don't see. So she's off, maybe enjoying a summer evening. There is lots going on in the summer times, and I expect, and I want it to be a little bit lighter in the amount of people that show up and hang out with me on Sunday nights in the summertime, because it's important, like I said, to connect to Mother Nature. So good. I don't have as many comments tonight to reflect on as I usually do. I'd much rather have the crew in here, but right. It saves me, because I do start yapping and I really go a little bit further. And also at the same time, these guys, they have some great insights also. And sometimes, they pick the subjects, sometimes they say something in a comment, and, that's the topic we're going to move into. Or sometimes I'm yapping about something and it becomes reflective with Andrew or Owen, and they'll go, oh, yeah, I remember that, or this is what happened to me, or that's just like the book I read, or right? And this is how it moves down. It is in our interactions with each other. Okay. Yeah, but very surprised that's your last movie that you have been to. But what a good movie to go to, Titanic, right? That had a good message in it too, didn't it? Right? Kind of like, yeah, had a good message. And it's important for us to reflect also in the past. And even though it is not a true story, it is a true event, right? Andrew, did you hear anything about that ship? I believe it was in Cuba, Cuba and Spain are actually fighting for the rights to the ship. They said it was $30 billion, $30 billion worth of gold and jewels and priceless artifacts. It was a Spanish ship. They found it in, I believe, 2021, but they only got the evidence as to what kind of ship it was and what it was holding. And the only reason they knew that was because of the coinage, the stampage on the coinage. But this ship went down in like really early. It was like early 1600s, yeah, like 1644. I said, oh my goodness. But I guess, yes, the Spanish were doing a lot of traveling in North America at that time, even though, right, we always give credit to Christopher Columbus, but you can't even give North America to Christopher Columbus because it was actually the Vikings who first settled North America, right? It's If Kathy was here, she would let us know the true story on that because I believe it is on the East Coast, Nova Scotia, Labrador, Newfoundland. I'm not quite sure. I've read articles and watched documentaries on it, but yeah, the Vikings landed in North America, and in truth, maybe they should get the credit. I'm just going to give a cough every once in a while because you know what popcorn does to the throat, right? It's yummy, but it sure scratches things up on the way down. And big, I had a big bag of popcorn, you guys. Oh my goodness. I didn't even think I was going to finish it. And like I said, my tummy is a little bit sensitive because there was a lot of grease on that popcorn too, right? But did you hear anything about that Spanish galleon? It's the largest treasure ever discovered in the entire world. And that was just a declaration that they just, right, got that evidence and was able to declare that to the world. Now, Cuba and Spain are in mutual, what do you call that, conversations because they both agree because it said that over 600 people on that Spanish galleon died and went down with the ship. And so they understand they have to take into consideration that that is actually a graveyard, right? And they have to pay respects. And they both agree that they're going to do it the right way. They're not going to war over, right? But they both want their cut. For me, myself, it would be kind of that idea. Who was that king who split the baby in half, right? That if there is an argument in that, just split the treasure in half, right? That's a lot of money. $30 billion, the biggest treasure. And then they said what the second biggest treasure was, and I meant to write it down so I could Google it because I'd never heard of that one either. And that one was actually a hoard. It wasn't a ship that sank or anything. It was something that was hidden away that they found. If you heard of that one too, I'd like to get that one too, so I can, right, maybe find a documentary or find some articles on that because I'm not familiar with that. I love the hoards, right? The metal detectors who find those hoards. They just found one in Scotland, a hoard in Scotland, gold, silver, gems, rubies, all rough cuts and everything, but it was a very big hoard. But the hoard can't all be attributed as a Scottish hoard, even though it was found in Scotland. But it was an accumulation, and they said it might have been passed down like inheritances from one generation to another. And because they were from different countries, different regions in Europe and Asia that this horde came from. They don't think it was like those hordes when you trample over a country and you take everything. They don't believe it was one of those. They think it was something that was actually hidden away so that it wouldn't be found. Now there was something else that came in the news this week. You guys heard about Homo sapiens, us, modern man. We're 100,000 years older than what the world has been saying, right? That we always thought that we didn't always think we were 200,000, but as of recent investigations and DNA testing and stuff, that they discovered that Homo sapiens, which is us, modern man, have been around for 200,000 years. They have found remains in Spain, and they found it, and they said in like 2019. But again, you have, before you shoot your mouth off about anything, you have to know the facts, and I should be knowing that myself. But so anything I say, take it for a grain of salt. It's an article. It's a documentary. It's another thought leader, right, offering up the information. And so some of it is hearsay, but we really can't lie online and think that we can get away get away with it. We make mistakes. We all make mistakes in that. But that's why I needed to be reminded. But there was something else besides that skull that made it so, right. We've been around for 300,000 years. That's absolutely incredible. But in comparison to how old the Earth is right now, right? That's just much, and yeah. But so many great discoveries going on. Oh, there was there were so many. I love discoveries. I love new discoveries, and in this age of AI, it's technology is offering up so many tools, right? Like in South America, finding huge cities all over the place. Oh, I know the one that the discovery. I know Andrew's probably heard about this one at the very least. They found a King Richard. It's going really, no, not King Richard. They found King Richard in a parking lot a few years ago. Uh, it was another king going back to the 15th century uh, in a chapel, and they have caverns, what do you call those? Catacombs underneath the church. And in when the Second World War happened, they had discovered some crowns, and they were the kings and queens crowns, right? They were real crowns and jewels and stuff that belonged to the king and the queen. Well, maybe didn't belong to them because they were created actually for the funeral. They were funerary wear, these crowns. And during the Second World War, everything was going haywire, and so they decided to hide them away. And they hadn't been seen since. It passed down from generation to generation, and a little bit of documentation. They said that they had been put back into the catacombs. They were hidden in the catacombs again for safekeeping from the Second World War. So over the decades, there was another discovery. This is a good one. This is a good one. I'll tell you that one too. But they'd go down, and for decades they would search. But because of AI learning and technology these days, they were able to put one of those snake cameras inside cracks in the catacombs and stuff. And they found a false wall in the catacombs, because you can't just go tearing the catacombs about. because that's history in itself too, isn't it? And you would be destroying history. And, two wrongs don't make a right in that. But they put the camera inside the cracks. They found the false wall. But because the false wall wasn't original to the catacombs, right? They got the permission to bring the wall down, and they found three crowns, the king's crown and two other funerary crowns, jewelry, beautiful gold medallions. What do you call those sticks with the big ball on the end? They found one of those. And even though they found it in like 2019, they had to make sure they did all the tests. Everything's all cleaned up, and it's now being presented in a museum now, which is really pretty awesome. And yeah, so the other discovery that I was going to say is during the reign, it's not the reign, the presidency of John F. Kennedy. And if you guys remember, he had a brother, Robert Kennedy, and he was out on a drive with a woman, and they went over a bridge. And remember, right, this is a lot of hearsay. This is what I'm remembering from the articles and stuff, so don't quote me for any facts at all, but it is true. You can Google it yourself and find the technicalities and the actual truths in that. They got in an accident, and the lady died, and John F. or the brother of the president, he didn't report it for over 10 hours. So there was a lot of conspiracy theory and stuff going on about that. Well, there was a man whose father who had been doing all the investigations on that. And he, at that time with technology, they had video recorders, those square boxes and the little microphone and the tape cassette. And he was doing interviews and collecting evidence. And he actually wrote a book on what Giuseppe River Bridge or something. Yeah, and the lady passed away. And he got off of the, right, like, they let it go. There wasn't enough evidence and something. But this man's father, who had done all the interviews and done all the investigations and stuff, he kept all those cassettes. He kept all those tapes and all those interviews and articles that he wrote. Like, he kept all that evidence. But he passed away suddenly without letting his son know where it was. And this was fairly early. His dad passed away. And his son has been spending his life trying to track down these cassettes, to track down all the evidence, because he wanted to reopen it. Because of technology and AI learning, could do a lot better job in the investigations. And also, a lot of the evidence could not be used as evidence because it was hearsay, right? So there was a lot of evidence that was not included in the book that his father had written on the Kennedy case. And yeah, he spent his entire life. Well, they found the cassettes, they found the tapes. It was actually a lawyer during that time who had possession of them. And I guess they were closing down the offices and stuff and going through stuff. And because it had his father's name on it, it was returned to the family. Now his son is going to write a book. Maybe investigate more on his own. But he's super happy that he found those cassettes after all these decades. And it was a whole case full. It was. And right, you can get an hour and a half on a cassette, can't you? Wow. Yeah. Maybe you guys don't know. Maybe you don't come from the era that I grew up in. It was 60s and 70s when we used those tape decks. And we're not talking the real ones. Like maybe they used those ones when he talked about tapes. Maybe that was the eight reel that he was talking about. But for myself, when they said they found the tapes, I was thinking the cassette tape. So again, don't count me as truth. Go investigate it on their own. Like I said, I love Discovery. So I get to hear about them all because, right, Google knows, YouTube knows what my interests are. And if there's a new discovery, I want to know about it because I munch on stuff like that. It's interesting. It is inciting in that. Okay, I'm going to come into the comments here for a few minutes and see what's going on. But yeah, Titanic, 1997. That's a long time. Well, the movie I saw before this one, Superman, which had a great message for the world, you guys. I just love that the world is coming together with some of the same messages, some of these messages that had never come across my path, about choices. Oh my goodness, I could have done with that lesson when I was like 12 years old, right? And about understanding that we are who we want to be, who we want to put that effort in. And even if your dad is a mass murderer and your mother is a total psycho, right? That we get to make those choices as to who we are, who we want to be. We're not our mother's children. We are not our father's children when it comes to this and this. This is our choice, right? Lots of stuff we don't get to dictate. We don't get to dictate our experience within our household when we're growing up, right? Your parents dictate that. But, right? Oh my goodness, we are moving forward. Like the kids are watching these movies and they're being educated, just like I was educated in Sesame Street without even knowing. I just love Big Bird and Grover and right? But it wasn't just the comic books, I don't believe. I think it was Sesame Street that helped me to learn, that helped me probably to have that respect for my parents when maybe, right, I felt at the time that maybe, right, some people didn't deserve that respect. Or maybe in my misunderstanding of, that I could be my own person, that some of those lessons maybe did seep in without me noticing. And if you went to see Superman, maybe you would notice it. If you're anything like me, maybe you would notice the great messaging in that movie. But we're all coming together. We are all changing. We're not changing just separately. We are changing as a conglomerate, right? And we get to decide, are we going to move along with that? Are we going to let ourselves be left to the wayside, right? That could be the case too. I can only judge for myself, but like I said, it really impressed me so much that I'm clapping away at these parts and being the only one in the movie theater clapping at those positive aspects of the movie, that great messaging in the movie that's meant for everybody, right? I caught the message right away, but I suspect a lot of that audience has little cracks in themselves too, and the message got through. I bet you, right? It makes me feel like I'm part of the community. It makes me feel because in my own little way and what I can contribute, right? I do the I do the same thing. But it was really nice seeing my sisters today. We went grocery shopping afterwards, and she drove me home, and we were both energized until I walked in the door and totally crashed. Like I said, I almost dozed, like serious. It was the most craziest doze too, because I felt my head was going to hit the desk, and I just, as it went down, it popped up, and I says, you know what? Set your alarm for 2 hours. You can go take a nap for 2 hours before your live show. It's best to be refreshed and ready to go for your live and not all brain dead and stupid and dozy and not have anything to say. It's not like I've got anybody having this conversation with me other than what's going on in the comments. So, I have to come in and hold up my live show. But here I am. My goodness, I haven't stopped talking. And I think it was pretty incredible, you know, uh, how that came about because I really did crash. I really did need a short nap. I didn't take a nap at all, but it was nice to lay in bed for an hour. Okay, coming to the contents, we'll talk a little bit about the fire. Um, but yeah, that movie was super loud, Andrew. I agree with you. Movies are very loud, at least when you're taking in content yourself, that you can control the volume, can't you? Even with the headphones on and stuff. Do you wear headphones at all, Andrew? I'm sure you do at work. You've got headphones on, but again, it's in the AI learning, and we allow ourselves to be pulled into it, like you guys are coming to hang with me Sunday. This is being allowing yourself to be pulled into it. Sometimes it's not in the lesson for our use in this moment, this hour, this month, this lifetime, right? But maybe it's just something that might come in youth helpful somewheres down the road, right? That it's something, and even if you don't live by it in the moment, that maybe in rubbing shoulders and having conversations or a new discovery, that right, maybe you'll remember what old Cindy said, and you go, "Ooh, I get it now," right? This is my hopes anyway. It's not necessarily happening, but I am optimistic that that could happen, just like in the movies today and finding nose cracks, and I recognized it right away. Right? And I wasn't even embarrassed. I was kind of hoping and kind of a little disappointed that nobody else was clapping along with me, but that's okay, right? That's okay. Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's what Superman was like today. Oh my goodness. It really truly did feel like my chair was shaking. My bed chair. Oh my goodness, again in this age of AI learning and the digital technology, that chair rolled down like it was a bed, like I was going to go suntanning, right? That I could go to sleep in it. And it even had temperature control. I didn't need temperature control because I was actually looking for a little bit more air conditioning because I actually wore my hoodie today because I thought the theaters would be cool. I know when I go to the grocery store, I go to the drugstore, that sometimes I think, oh my goodness, I should have brought my shawl in today, right? It's really cold in here, but you know it's to their loss because that just makes it so that I don't want to stick around in the store too long because I'm cold, or if it's too hot that I go in there and I'm just, oh, right, let's get outside. It's never like that in the grocery stores, but the air conditioning, right? I should have, especially when you go through that section with the milk and the ice cream and stuff, like everything is just freezing. You just have to run as fast as you can into the next aisle. Good thing that I am on a diet in the moment. And I'm calling it a diet this time because it is in just getting better and just eating better. I'm eating more meat now and vegetables, and I'm making nice dinners and breakfasts. I have 2 meals a day, and if I want, I have a snack. I usually don't have a snack, and I had a snack today. I had the popcorn today, but I don't know. But I'll give myself, if I want a snack, I can have one snack a day. It doesn't matter what it is. And it's been working. I'm down 15 pounds, and I don't think it's been 2 weeks. I understand you lose the weight a little bit faster because you got water to start with coming off you. But yeah, I'm pretty happy. 14 pounds exactly is what I lost, and maybe in the next couple of days I can say 15 pounds. How much do I want to lose? I don't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I had only lost 10 pounds and if I don't lose any more weight and I just stay in this way of eating. It's just good eating habits for me, and I would be okay with that too. But I'm eating pretty good. I'm eating sunflower seeds and vegetables and lots of meat, and I'm taking in lots of fluid. I drink the crystals, but I put like 2 or 3 times as much water in it. So it's basically flavored water, not very well flavored, but it's to help to keep those calories down. And because I'm not a big water fan, I don't even like to do the bottled water because the plastics get released into the water. And I think the bottled water causes more damage than to just drink, right? Something like this. And let's have another sip. And my voice is a little raunchy today because, like I said, I scraped the poop out of it with popcorn kernels. But that'll run through my system, scrape out all the, what do you call that? Uh, the hardening of the artery stuff, the plaque. Yeah, it'll scrape out the plaque in my intestines. That's what it will do. So I'm not worried about it. Um, what? Tell me about that. This is one of the most frightening movies ever made. The Wizard of Oz, really. You look into it and you can read into different stories. I hear that the same idea with shows like Alice in Wonderland, and there was another one that came across my path, and I'm like, oh my goodness, all these underlining meanings that none of us even catch on to. But give me your idea about Wizard of Oz if you haven't already. I'm going down in the comments right now to see. Oh, yeah. Okay. It was very unusual for me to have a friend over. There was no rule, it was just something that wasn't done. Yeah, my parents were good with sleepovers. We could go over to our friend's house and have sleepovers and stuff. I wouldn't even think to have my friends come over for a sleepover because, right, just there was a lot of fighting and arguing and dictation in my family. And at that time, I was so sensitive that, I built up little personas and not like to make myself feel like I was better than anyone, but to feel that at least I wasn't less than anyone. And I didn't want anybody that I was making a friend with or getting to know what my family was really like. My sisters were always amazing, but I come from parents of the two extremes, one volatile, one right swinging to the light side, and it was a very I just say it's a very dynamic family because that's exactly what it is. And when you come from a dynamic family, even if you don't want to take the personas or the habits or the way of thinking or the way of feeling from whatever is not impacting you well, you can't help it because these are the people you're around every single day. So, this is what I've been doing in the past half a dozen years is in right kind of relinquishing what didn't serve me, right? And not in a rejection or shameful way, but knowing that it wasn't a part of me. And you know what? It's okay to be different, even be different within your own family, because right, each one of us knows right from wrong, but not everybody practices it. And I wasn't going to practice the wrong only because of my own safety at the time. Now it's a different story, right? Now it's a different story, but then I didn't know. But you don't know until you know, right? And that's the truth. Um, it was a very unusual for me to have a friend over. There was no rule. It was just something that wasn't done. I hate mixing friends and family. to my parents, rarely had anyone over as a guest. And my family too, my dad was a very social person, more social than I was. He had a lot of friends. He was right outside of the house. Everybody loved my dad. And, but what was I going to say in that? He was a very introverted person. He didn't like to be around people. And my dad liked to be his own boss. That's why he was a commercial fisherman, because he worked with his brother-in-law, which was his very best friend. My mother's brother was my dad's best friend. And again, I'm going to have to say, because that narcissism, it does run on my mother's side, that possibly because I didn't know my Uncle Les so much, right? He only came to visit my dad. He wasn't so much into the family and the kids and stuff. He was my dad's friend, right? But I suspect that my Uncle Les was probably a little bit of a narcissist himself, right? And because my dad was empathic, my dad, right, loved my Uncle Les. But I could be wrong in that too, because there is no verification, there is no evidence. It's just in my feeling out the stories and the interactions and the relations in my own family. But yeah, my parents didn't have people over. My mother loved Jesus, so when the Mormons would come knocking on the door, or the Jehovah Witnesses would come knocking on the door, she always invited them in, and we all sat around the table and had very, very long conversations, right? I never grew up to swing in that way in Christianity. And I'm not sure if you call it Christianity. I suspect that it is, because my mother, she tried them all out. My mother loved Jesus, but she didn't know what denomination of Christianity that she belonged to. She was born a Protestant. We never went to Protestant churches, but we went to evangelical, we went to gospel, Jehovah Witnesses. Um, I don't know a lot of them, right? I love Sunday school. I love the stories. I love the morals. It felt like a safe place for me. Like nobody would hurt me in a church. I love the Sunday picnics, right? The church picnics were my absolute favorite. But yeah, it was actually the Sunday school that I loved. Oh, and once or twice a week they would have crafts, would come in and do crafts, and you would get lessons in between, doing your crafts. It's like going to Salvation Army before you get your dinner, right? Here in Canada, Salvation Army runs soup kitchens. And before you and my Uncle Ted, who was a traveling pastor, that was his job, to build up the congregation in churches who were struggling in congregations. He would pick us up in his school bus, and he would take us to different denomination churches, and we would, right, he would use his own family to fill up the churches. And once the churches were full, then people from outside would say, oh, this is a busy church, this is a fun place, and they would join up. And then once the congregation was built up a little bit extra, because he knew he was going to take his family, right? My Uncle Ted and cousins and sisters and friends, whoever wanted to come. My mom, right? She always on these buses too. That we would just go off to the next church. But like I said, there was no real one denomination that she stuck with for any length of time. But I remember she never said no to the Mormons. We were from BC, so there are lots of Mormons on the southern part of Canada, on the west coast. So yeah, we would have Mormons and Jehovah Witnesses knock on the door. And I loved the stories, and they would always leave us, especially the Jehovah Witness. They had what I liked about their storybooks, and they were storybooks, actual story Bible stories, were the graphics and the fact that they did it in layman's terms, right? Not they and thou and, language that I didn't understand from the ancient days, right? That the Jehovah Witnesses, wrote their Bibles and books in a way that anybody could understand, right? And I appreciated that. And I loved the values and the stories. I just didn't understand why everybody didn't follow those values. Well, there were leniencies and um, outs, right? That people got away with doing outside of the church. I didn't understand any of that. By the time I hit my teenage years, I was done. My parents both decided uh, that, right? My dad probably decided, my mom had to go along with it, that none of us kids would be baptized. None of us children were baptized. I don't think even as an adult, my sisters went to church. So as adults, they wouldn't have been baptized either. My parents wanted to leave that to our choice. I suspect because they were from the two extremes, just not in their personality categories, right? But also in their beliefs, because my mother was a Christian, my father was very spiritual. So I guess, and I'm thinking that's why my father wanted us to make our own choices as to whether or not to be baptized. My sister Tracy, she loves Jesus, right? She doesn't go to church, but she loves Jesus, right? But she's like my mom that way. Tracy was my mother's daughter, but tenfold better, right? And I'm so grateful that we got an opportunity to hang out because it's important to keep these relationships going. This is our family, and this is how we learn to get better, right? One person learns and passes down that information, just like I did in the discoveries that were going on in the past couple of weeks, and sharing some of those that it isn't that we slowly learn, or even like that movie Superman today, that somehow that amazing motivational and inspiration and that lesson that I really wanted, right? I thought I had that lesson down pat, that it was just confirmation for me that yeah, it's true. I can be that person, and it found its way, right? It didn't need to go through a crack in me. It hit me. Like I said, I was the only one clapping when that great message, right? That could have easily come from a pastor or a priest or even a politician, because how politicians, they get up on the stage and they could be so strong and so commanding that they can get a message across, even if it's an untruth, right? To bring it about that we actually go, oh my goodness, and we are impacted and influenced by that. But we have to remember there's a big difference between being influenced and being manipulated. So that's why I'm grateful that my dad made that decision, my two parents, because my mother had to agree too. But she tried. She got us all into church, and we all stayed in Sunday school right up until our teenage years, right? And then we just all did our own thing after that. But yeah, interesting. My dad was an introvert too. Like I said, he had his one, two friends. I don't remember the gentleman. I think it was like Tony or something. He was a tall, skinny, dark man, and he was so nice. But he was a friend of my father's, and then my Uncle Les, who was best, my dad's best friend. Right after my dad's brother passed away, right? I would assume that my dad's brother was his best friend, but when my dad's brother passed away, my uncle, um, um, yeah, my Uncle Les became his best friends. And like I said, when my dad passed away, he drove. It took him 22 hours, but he drove all the way from Vancouver straight without any sleep and made it for the funeral. And he bawled and bawled. I never seen, like, I wasn't even as distraught. Mind you, my dad had been preparing us. We'd all known that was going to happen for decades, right? But my Uncle Les, and it just proved to me how wonderful my dad was and how much he truly was loved, because you know my Uncle Les totally lost it when my dad died. And what just came to my mind is how can how can my Uncle Les have been a narcissist if he had broken down the way he did when my father passed away? Because narcissists, they don't break down that way. They shut down, but they don't break down like that. So I'm going to have to re-visualize some of those relationships in my life because that's something I didn't take into consideration. And for me, that is proof to the opposite. Maybe they were both in paths, right? Right? We all take after, we all get to make choices in our life, and that's the truth. Andrew says, I understand why at the time when I was in the seventh grade, I would watch Sesame Street after school. Get that notification out. Uh, Now I see that it was a calming place after what I had gone through at school. Yeah, I was glued to the TV, you guys, you know. It was a place where I couldn't be rejected. It was a place where I couldn't be abused, right? It was my safe zone. And especially when both my parents worked, that, we were pretty feral. We pretty much brought up ourselves, except when they got home from work. That, yeah, the TV really did become a friend for me. And a lot of my influence, it served me well, but probably wasn't so realistic because, like my influence was like Puff and Stuff, Scooby Doo, and Pippi Longstockings, right? And I guess that's where the adventure in me comes from, is from that influence that Pippi Longstockings had on me and the choices that I made, right? But you're 100% Andrew, right? Uh, I was older than Sesame Street's target audience, but it was a place of calm too. I just liked it, and I think I may have developed late, never tested, but as I've said, I may be autistic. Yeah, but it's okay to be autistic because I've been studying autism too, Andrew. And autism is only having our own language for ourselves, our own understanding for ourselves, right? We speak a different language, and it does make us isolated in that because people don't get us, right? I suspect I have a little bit of autism in me too, but it's just a way of thinking that is different than the majority. And that's okay because you need different perspectives. If we didn't have different perspectives, how would we recognize a wrong in the right? Okay. I haven't heard about the treasure ship. I can only imagine what kinds of things are down there. You can Google it. It's really interesting. You have videos on it now. You can actually see the crowns and the that stick with the ball on the end that's made like solid gold. You can see that in a case. They've got content. It's in the museum, but they've got video of that. You can go check it out themselves. They actually have video of that camera that went inside the crack and took film. They actually showed the skeletal remains because the coffins at that time had disintegrated. So it was just, the skeletons on the floor and the skulls on the floor. And the skull, they just thought was caked in mud because they really couldn't see, but they didn't recognize that the skull, even though it was off to the side a little bit, that it was wearing its crown, but it was a funerary crown. It wasn't one of those crowns that you, when you're sitting on your throne, that you wear. It was made specifically for his funeral. Uh, Vikings were here long ago in Virginia. A Christmas message was found carved into the painted, really, on the face of the rocks in a national park. The writing is protected by an overhang. Are you kidding me? I never heard anything about that, Andrew. They just discovered, well, they didn't discover, but they've always known that there was a saying carved into a rock in Ontario. And that was another discovery this week that I heard about. But when they analyzed it and everything, they found that it was from the early 1800s. which because the language and the writing of it. So when they did all their tests, their final decision was that it was done in the early 1800s, which would also make sense because that's when the fur traders and the voyageurs were going on here in Canada. So it makes sense that that would have happened. That happened then. But yeah, oh, I didn't know the Vikings were down south too. Oh my goodness. I wonder which stop was more like older. This discovery was older. Was it the Vikings who entered into North America that discovered North America, or was it the Vikings who entered in through the east coast of Canada, who were the first right people to couple in the, and they don't even know how they got there or why they got there. They don't know if the wind picked them up and they just accidentally landed there because there were settlements. So they stayed for a while. I would think that maybe because it was so cold in Canada, because they think it was like in the 1500s or earlier than that, that they hit the North America, that maybe they did travel south, and that settlement that they discovered in the south is actually an extension of right of what was going on in Canada, that they were just moving, right? Like we did with hunting buffalo. We follow the herd, we follow the warmth, and that they made it down that way. That's really interesting. I'm gonna Google that and find out in Virginia. Virginia Christmas message carved. I'll Google that and it should come up right away. The Christmas message was written in a Viking language. Oh, so interesting. King Solomon talked about cutting a baby in half to test which two women was the real mother. The baby was never actually harmed, right? Maybe that's going to be the same idea with the Spanish galling. Maybe they'll bring up the treasures, divvy it out between the two countries, the two continents, right? Divvy it out, and then leave the ship down below as as um, as a graveyard, right, in memorial to the 600 sailors who lost their life. Who knows? Maybe that Spanish galleon wasn't just trade. Maybe it was booty. Maybe a lot of people passed away, and that was just God saying, "Oh no, right? Nobody's getting this," and just sunk the ship. You don't know, right? Okay, we're coming down here. Uh, this week is the 70th anniversary of the sinking of the Andreas Doria. Inside the ship is the concept ear called the Chrysler Norseman, decayed and irretrievable now. So interesting. I don't think I heard, well, I've heard of the Andrea Doria, but I didn't understand, the Chrysler Norseman. I'm going to Google that one too, Andrew, and take a little bit of discovery information going on, right? Uh, yeah, King Richard. That was pretty cool. And the first hole, they thought it was going to take a long time to figure out exactly where he's built, but they only made like a 12 by 12 hole in the concrete, and they hit the coffin immediately, right? Which tells me God had a hand in it because they didn't have a map. They knew the area in which he had passed away. And we're going to send some good cheer to the fire truck and the paramedics that they get to their destination and it's a false alarm. I do that numerous times a day, right? Unfortunately. Okay. Something still a mystery is the burial site of Anne Boleyn. Oh yes, I was reading something about that last week that they haven't found it yet. The site, but you know what? I think it was out of respect in that one. You know what I mean? That possibly he's the king because he felt bad about getting getting rid of her, but he just found somebody else that he wanted to be with, and yeah, that's another story in itself. Um, uh, that was Ted Kennedy who was in the car with Mary Jo. Oh my goodness, she even knew her name. I recall that, but didn't understand what was going on because they were keeping it so hush hush. There were so many conspiracy theories. And because his brother was the president, or at least running for president at that time, that it was kind of killed, right? So we don't know what's going on with these cassettes yet. The son is going to go through them. He just got the case, so I'm sure he's going to go through them. He's going to write his own book. And yeah, we'll see what leaks out of those cassettes. Oh, good. The bridge at Chippaquiddick, if I pronounced it properly. Andrew says, I talk on the phone and type simultaneously at work, so have to wear headphones for that. Yeah, I thought you did. See, Andrew, you allowed yourself to be pulled into the technology age. If you didn't have that job, right, Andrew? If you things are always dropping. I think that was the broom. Things are always dropping in my house. I would think that if you hadn't had that job in research at the university like that, that maybe if you had had a different job, that being pulled into technology in any way might not have happened for you. What do you think on that, Andrew? And while you write your thoughts on that, seeing it was this last comment, before I go, I want to talk a little bit about the fires going on. You guys, I can barely see downtown. The smoke is so thick. When my sister picked me up to go to the movie today, we small talked about the fires, and I was in the smoke, and I said, you know what? Let's just take the smoke as a good sign, because for me, all that smoke is saying that it rained, right? You know how the smoke goes up in the air when the rain hits it, when the water hits it, right? So let's look at it like that. I Googled a little bit before I came live about what's going on with the fires, because I thought maybe you guys would be interested in what's going on out here. It is pretty bad. It is in our evolution, and we're just not evolving as human beings, right? The world is evolving too. We are moving out of the ice age, and it's just going to get hotter and hotter and hotter, right? Our 40 below and our 50 below Celsius winters, I suspect, are probably going to be coming to an end, other than the odd winter storm, that it is going to come to an end, and we are going to move into an age where it's going to be very dry. So when I think of what's coming for the future to the world, I think I'm pretty situated here on Manitoba. We got lots of Great Lakes that it'll take a long time for that water to dry up. That we will have problems with the forest fires. They will get worse and worse. We might even have to, right, cut our fires down. Maybe that's what happened, you know, in the Aztec days, in the days of the Aztecs, that, people wonder, why did they leave? And they said, well, because there was no trees. They couldn't build, they couldn't have fires if there were no trees. But there are lots of things that you can use as firewood. There really is. You can use cow dung, right? In England, they use swamp sod. Right? They would just cut out chunks of the ground, dry it, and it was burning fuel for your home. Keep the whole house warm. So, when you say that they cut down the trees and there were no more trees, but if you cut down the trees, you also lose the nutrients in the soil, because the water hits the ground and it's not being absorbed by tree branches and stuff like that, that it just starts running. But in reality, the Aztecs had technologies where they mixed different organics in order to make black dirt. And black dirt is actually the most fertile dirt in the world. And when they're doing testing on the ground in South America, the soil is very nutrient rich, in truth. So I suspect it had something to do with the Spanish. maybe like any city, that things get so rough and tumble, that things they go bad, right? The people go bad, the houses break down, they're too old. Instead of tearing them down, you rent these houses out to the lower incomes, and the lower incomes get in there. The low incomes have problems, and so there are coping mechanisms like drugs and alcohol, you know, and so the whole neighborhood goes down. And so the people who do have money and do have family that they're grooming or trying to raise to be good contributors to a world, that they say, hi, we're not living here anymore. And that's what happened here in Winnipeg. They just, in the 1910s, they just left the downtown area to the poor people and to the manufacturing and companies. So it was just a place to go to work rather than it was a place to live in. And they built housing on this side of the river. That could have happened too, and a new city could have been built, 100 kilometers away from, the pyramids of the Aztecs, in a city that had been abandoned, right? And but we don't know. But in this day and age of technology, in AI learning, oh my goodness, they're finding the cities now, you guys. They're finding the cities. Okay, you guys, this is the end of the live tonight. Uh, Andrew says, I agree, Cindy. In another job, I probably would not have learned the things that I've learned at work. And I know that even if I didn't know you, I would have missed you, Andrew, because you bring so much to my life. You bring so much to my brand, and you bring so much to that idea of what friendship can really be, that it truly does take all kinds to make the world. Andrew, Owen, you have a great night. If you haven't hit that thumbs up, do that for me. Maybe YouTube will suggest that out to somebody else. Um, if you're done for the night, I'm done for the night. I'm going to make myself a cup of coffee because this one's cold, and I haven't managed to get a whole cup of coffee into me tonight. So I think that I'm going to relax a little bit, stay up as long as I can, right? So that I can sleep good all through the night. I am a good sleeper. I hope you guys are all sleeping good. I hope your health is holding up pretty decently throughout the week, that it'll make it so you can make it back here next Sunday. Have a great night. I really enjoyed yapping and hanging out with you guys tonight. We'll see if you want to come and hang out with us during the week, right? For What's My Good Cheer. Well, I'll be around. You guys have a great night. See you next week.